I do want to start with, oh, sorry. I do want to say it's been a challenging project, and I hope it's as rewarding at the end as the challenges that we started with. So Rhoda is sharing the screen. So I'll start with the first slides and Rhoda start midway between. So what is GM TRIP? So the Gros Morne Tourism Regional Implementation Project, GM TRIP, is dedicated to building cooperation among partners within Gros Morne National Park region with the goal of strengthening the regional tourism industry and achieving long-term economic sustainability. So you can see it's a lofty challenge. The collaboration among key partners, funders, stakeholders, town councils, and residents will explore untapped tourism potential, challenges to capitalizing on opportunity, and the identification of strategic projects in each of these communities that solidify the regional tourism experiences. The result, stronger regional partnerships with the capacity to support the tourism industry, accelerate post-COVID recovery, and booster the economy. So it's a lofty order, and I hope we're up for the challenge. Next slide, Rhoda. So we are 7 enclave communities totally surrounded by the park. We're a population of less than 3,000 in total up to 7 communities. So this is a partnership between 7 communities and Parks Canada, because we're so integrated here that we have to actually share resources. Our decisions impact each other. So it's really important that we start communicating from the one plan. A little bit of an overview of GM TRIP. So we started 2 years ago. Kicked our project out around September, October, and went into COVID in March. So we've had to be really innovative. Now we engage community and partners. We're funded from ACOA, tourism, culture, arts and recreation, small crafts and arbors. And just a second, I have to move this, and GMCA. The work continues. It's the work of STAR. We were a pilot for STAR back 6 years ago, and that was basically to develop a vision for Gros Morne, but it wasn't a detailed plan. So we were always challenged now to move forward. The project partners are 7 enclave communities and Gros Morne National Park. Our deliverables are tangible tourism projects and capacity building. And I have to tell you, we felt that the success of this project would be around capacity building. The 7 tourism projects would be an asset, but that would not be where we sort of met the challenge. Capacity building piece is so important because, we lack leadership. We have changing leadership. We have overworked town clerks. And, we have the lack of ability to create economic development in our community in some cases. And this is very timely because the province of Newfoundland and Labrador a year ago put together a task force to address regional economic development in rural Newfoundland. So we're lining up, we're ahead of the gate before this task force, but a lot of the recommendations of this task force is exactly what a GM TRIP has been trying to do without using the big stick. So you understand, I guess, who Gros Morne Cooperating Association is and why we're involved in this. We just want to tell you a little bit about our organization and how we built capacity here in the region and why we took on GM TRIP. So in '93, we were formed, GMCA, Gros Morne Cooperating Association, to be a partner of Parks Canada. So we were a friend of the Parks Group. And within a couple of years, we knew we had to include communities in this and have a vision for communities also. So our mandate expanded in '95 to incorporate communities. In 2004, we took over the management of GMIS, the Gros Morne Institute for Sustainable Tourism. And basically, you're all aware, that's a training institute for Atlantic Canada. Right after that, we created another partnership, Gros Morne Gatherings, which Steve works for. This partnership is a levy partnership, is a business-to-business partnership, and 7 of the largest accommodators here in Gros Morne have been collecting a levy since 2004. They've collected over $1.5 million and they put it back into destination marketing. In 2013, we also took over best practice missions for Atlantic Canada. And I'm sure some of you have been very familiar with these best practice missions that we've taken you to in North America to show you some, good practices outside of our local region. Gros Morne was known for a natural destination, but we had awesome creative programming here. So around 2013-14, we were tasked with building Gros Morne as a creative destination. So we started Creative Gros Morne in about 2014. So that board is all creative arts people in the Gros Morne region. That would include festivals and events. So right after that, so we had a partnership with training, we had a partnership with business, we had a partnership with parks, but we really did not have a real strong partnership with municipalities. So in 2017, we started STAR, and we were the first regional group that did STAR. So STAR was a year-long process that developed a 10-year vision for Gros Morne. So we were from 2017 to 2020 trying to implement a vision without a plan. And so we put 3 years, we did better communication, we did forums and tourism forums and better engagement with the local communities, but we found we were still short on a plan to move forward in our tourism industry. So we decided in 2020 that it was time that we all had a common plan and a common goal to look forward to. So we started GM Trip. As I said, we started that in September of 2020. And right after that, we were challenged with how do we communicate and engage the public with COVID. And we've been really innovative and we did some great work. We have a year left in this project. So, I think we will hit our target, but it hasn't been without challenges up and down the way. So in our tourism vision, like everybody else, we did our SWOT analysis. We looked at like what we were doing great, what we could do better, what were some of the challenges and threats of what we were working on, and what were the gaps. So GM Trip was about addressing these gaps and how did we move forward. So Rhoda, I think I'm going to pass this to you right at this point.
Okay. So the significant gap that was identified with it, but by the way, did we ever tell you what GM Trip stood for? Gros Morne Tourism Regional Implementation Project. I just don't know if sometimes we get so used to living within acronyms that we forget that they're not as, they don't have meaning if somebody doesn't have the word spelled out. So the big gap that was identified was good intentions to participate in regional tourism, but then a failure to act locally. And by locally, we mean a failure to act within individual municipalities. So there might have been people coming to the table and saying, yes, we endorse this regional tourism plan, the towns, the mayors, other players within the region. But then when it came to making decisions locally that impacted tourism regionally, there was a failure to act regionally. There's a much more tendency to act locally. So of course, as we all know, it's great to have a plan. I'm a big list maker, and sometimes after I make my list, I feel like I've actually done something, but we all know you haven't actually done anything until you start checking things off the list. So Colleen is the person who kind of probably holds this vision inside her head more than anyone else. And I think this was probably a question that really plagued her. What would it take to truly implement a regional tourism? It's not just to talk about it, not just to have a plan, not just to create reports, committees, but to actually move to action, to truly implement a regional tourism plan. And so what it was determined it would actually take to do that would be the park, a national park, and so of course national parks are governed by their mandate at the national level, federal level, and then 7 municipal governments agreeing to work together. So these municipal governments and these enclave communities are tiny. Some of these enclave communities only have, 200, 300, 400 in population. And their municipal governments are elected councillors who are essentially volunteers who are elected to serve on council and make decisions for that municipality. So it would take the national park and these 7 small municipal governments coming together. And by the way, these municipalities don't have huge staffs, as you can imagine. They all have either a town clerk or town manager. Some of them have a few other staff members on board. Many of them have just that one single person. So the other thing that would take would be common language in municipal plans for each town, i.e. in their development regulations that spoke to a commitment to regional tourism. And when we started, some of the towns had, 2 of the towns had very, very outdated municipal plans. One of them had a municipal plan that hadn't been updated since the early 80s. I think actually 2 of them were in that boat. One of those towns has corrected that and has hired an urban, not an urban planner, but a municipal planner person and they're in the process of having their new municipal plan ratified. But as you all know, when you can have a municipal plan and a nice binder full of regulations, but if they don't actually live at the point of decision, so when the councillors are sitting around that table, when they have a proposal in front of them, something that they're considering, chances are they're not going to open that binder up and start reading through their development regulations. So the other thing that we thought it would take to get there were user-friendly tools to use at the point of decision. So something that would help a council to kind of bring that filter in front of them. Okay, we're about to make a decision. Like, what are a couple of questions we need to ask ourselves that would impact our participation in regional tourism? And then lastly, finding some kind of a sustainable mechanism that creates the right regional entity. So we knew that there needed to be some kind of an entity created. But we also knew that it couldn't just be, another committee. That it really needed to be something that had a strong mandate, that brought people to the table, that kept people at the table, this has proved to be a considerable challenge, as one of our consultants, who's a real expert in municipal governance, has been digging deep into the province's various statutes, laws, and regulations to see what could be legally created to create this regional entity. So those are kind of Colleen started with her kind of tall order, and this is sort of repeating it again. But this is what we thought it would take to actually move from the kind of idea on paper to implementing the plan in the region. So this is just to give you a brief sketch of what we've been up to in the past year. The very first thing, when Colleen and I started talking about working together on this back, I think in July of 2020 or August. And one of the things that we agreed on quite early on was that we needed to have a working group for this project that have representatives from those 8 critical partners. So one from each town and from Parks Canada, Gros Morne National Park. So I shouldn't say we, Colleen was the one handling all of this, set about to talk to the towns, explain the project, what we were going after, what she had actually secured funding for GM Trip, didn't have a name at that time, and asked them to appoint somebody from their town to sit on this working group. And lo and behold, what we ended up with were the clerk managers. Now, I have to tell you that initially when Colleen came to me and said, okay, the reps from the town are going to be the town clerk managers, I kind of said, oh, I'm really? Like I was, in my head, I was thinking each town would, put forward, some, kind of leading advocate for the town, you know, somebody from their council or somebody who was kind of a leading tourism advocate for their town. But and Colleen said to me, no, I think this is good. And I have to say, she was absolutely right. These town clerk managers representing their towns on the working group has proved to be, I think, one of the strong points of GM Trip. We hired a consultant now. When I'm saying we now, I mean the working group. And so we actually created the RFP with the working group. We created a review process with them. How were we going to review the proposals that came in? So we created sort of some criteria of how we're going to look at them. We created a process. We used, some of you may be familiar with the Delphi technique. We used a modified Delphi technique to come to consensus on who they would recommend to hire. We decided on how we were going to check references, how we were going to bring that into the process. So this was the first out the gate work with the working group, and involved actually a lot of hours for them, because everybody on the working group reviewed all of the proposals and came to a decision about how they ranked them, who they had in first place, and so on. And then they had to sort of learn how we were going to use this Delphi technique. And of course, this was all done virtually. So hiring the right consultant with the right skills, we knew, because of the capacity building piece of this project, finding somebody who's going to come along and give you some recommendations about developing kind of concrete tourism initiatives in town isn't that hard. There's a lot of people out there who do that kind of thing. But finding a consulting team who also brought to the table the expertise to kind of dig into these municipal governance documents, understand the kind of upstream stuff within the Department of Municipal Affairs was a taller order. So we hired the right consultant, the team, we believe we did. Project ownership, staying with the working group, is incredibly important. And we learned lesson early on that when we kind of galloped ahead and left them behind, they were not happy. And so so an example of that is, so we had so Colleen and myself and Kim Loveys of GMCA, along with Todd White, who chairs STAR, formed this little kind of executive group, I guess, of the working group. And we would meet sometimes when we had to kind of quickly meet with the consultant to address an issue. And what we found was that if we made decisions and got ahead of the working group, they called us on it. Well, who are we? What is it? Why did you make that decision without consulting us, or without at least bringing us into the loop? So realizing that the ownership of this project had to stay with the working group was an incredibly important lesson early on. And also that I think there's a tendency sometimes, after you hire the consultant, to just kind of say, okay, well, now we're just going to sit back and wait for the consultant to do their work. But that never has happened in GM Trip. In GM Trip, the project has stayed very much with this local group, and the consultants are really very much seen as a group who are helping us do our work. So not that we hired them and they're going to do the work and then we're going to sit back and learn what they had to say. So that was an important thing that happened this past year. Now, that's not to say that the project doesn't need strong support and leadership. It does. And we need somebody who creates, if there's a meeting, who creates the outcomes, who creates the task list, who sends that out to people, who sends them reminders. We need people to create agendas for the meetings to kind of keep people focused on what their task is. And that's certainly a very necessary ingredient, and that has come from Colleen's team at GMCA. So, Kim and I and Colleen are very much the people who are providing the leadership and the support, while at the same time letting the working group keep ownership of the project. And I should say, not just the working group has ownership, but also STAR. And of course, STAR has those representatives, the mayors from all the towns, and representatives from heritage and business and culture. All right, keeping the working group informed and engaged, I think I've already addressed working closely with the consultants in a fluid work plan. So I think the work plan that the consultants brought forward originally and the one that we're working on right now is quite different in terms of the kind of key deliverables and touch points and timing. And we've been lucky that we have a consulting team who are very committed to this project and have been quite ready to kind of re-examine where we're at in the work plan and what needs to change. We did have a memorandum of understanding signed in July this past summer by all partners, and so I think you can probably imagine this was not an insignificant outcome. We had all 7 towns and parks signed a memorandum of understanding, which essentially said that they agreed to work together to build a regional tourism infrastructure. I mean, it's really what it said. It's obviously not a legally binding document. It's a memorandum of understanding, but it was a very significant step. We had a great gathering in one of the towns where we had Goody Hutchings come and address the group, and also the Premier of Premier Fury of Newfoundland and Labrador. All right, now defining desired outcomes. I'm just going to advance here. Who gets to set the desired outcomes? So I said project ownership stayed with the working group, and defining what are the outcomes of this. What's success? What's success look like in this project? At the end of the day, how are we going to know we were successful and achieved what we set out to achieve? Who gets to define those outcomes? Well, some of the outcomes come from the how the project was described by Colleen when she went to those funders and said, we want money to do this. So that the fact there were going to be tangible tourism projects in the region created, and then secondly, that we were going to build capacity in town. But how do we define the outcomes in a deeper way than that? Well, once again, we turn to the working group, and we had sessions with the working group where we asked them exactly that. What do you think success would look like? This was around this capacity building piece, because these are softer outcomes certainly to measure and softer outcomes to define. And so what you see on the screen here now are a series of statements that come pretty much verbatim from that were summarized from 2 sessions that we had with the working group to ask them what's success going to look like in this project. If we actually, how are we going to know we're there? So you'll see a lot of these statements talk about these partners truly working together. Communities will work together, not against each other, demonstrated by promoting each other to tourists. So there's a lot of, right now within the Gros Morne region, if you go across the top of this, you'll see north side, south side, central rivalry will disappear. So there's a kind of division within the Gros Morne region that you have 3 communities on the quote south side of Vaughan Bay. You have 2 that are central, and these are the 2 larger communities. They almost flow into each other and are one community. Now, I know that people from North Point and Rocky Harbour would not be happy to hear me say that, but they are communities that are very adjacent and central. Rocky Harbour and North Point, and then the north side, the 3 that are on the northernmost border of the parks, St. Paul's and Cowhead. So there definitely is a rivalry, and in a little bit I'm going to tell you about a resident survey we're doing where this has definitely been one of the themes that we've seen quite markedly. That people in particular on the north side and south side feel that central towns get all the love. They get all the services, they get all the work, they get all the work happening in their area, they get more attention from the park, etc. But if you look at these outcomes, they're and recognize that they came from the working group. I think that's what's significant. Gros Morne residents will see the park as an asset. It's not that long ago that people saw the park as a usurper, somebody who came in and started rearranging their communities and drawing boundaries and creating new rules. So not all residents of Gros Morne would see the park as an asset. Communities will not feel they're in competition with each other for the park's attention and support. You see the park coming up here quite a bit. So on one hand, the park is kind of this entity that that was visited upon them, but on the other hand, also people kind of competing for the park to bring more development to their area. So on. I think the last one here is a good one. Gros Morne Tourism will speak with one voice. So these success statements that you see here it was very important to have them defined by the working group. That's very much part of them owning. And just to stick with the working group for a little bit longer, what you see on this slide is just a little bit of a roundup of some of the actual work that this group did in the past year. So I already talked about how they made the recommendation about what consultant to hire. They defined success statements. They updated a huge tourism asset spreadsheet that GMCA maintains. COVID, our consultants were to be on the ground about this time last year, doing sort of their, familiarization tour. We had a COVID outbreak in Deer Lake, which is about where they were going to land from St. John's. And so we turned to the working group and asked them, could we create a series of videos to send to the consultants as kind of their virtual familiarization. So these guys, Colleen had a couple of GoPro, what are they called again?
GoPros.
GoPros, yeah, the cameras. And they went out and they did these narrated videos of their area. They focused on this is what our town's like, these are the tourism infrastructure and so on. And we sent those all off to the consultants. These guys handle a lot of the logistics when we want to have a virtual meeting, when we want to get the MOU signed. They're the ones who are kind of rallying the people in their town. When we're working on the resident survey that I'll tell you about in a moment, they were the first group who tested the survey. So that was an important first test of some of the questions and themes in the survey to make sure that we weren't using language and so on that was confusing. And then, of course, they promoted it to residents. They delivered the logistics planning when the consultant was on the ground this past summer. And then, of course, helped create the re-engagement plan for new councils, because this September, Colleen will in a minute tell you a bit about this little curveball we had, where we ended up with a whole pack of new mayors and new councillors. And then, of course, this is the last one, it's just an example of something we're doing recently, where we're looking at some of the come home year funding in Newfoundland to see if we should go after some regional money from Gros Morne, and the working group were the ones who met about that. So just to give you a sense of the kind of actual contribution that this group have made. All right, so the other decision we made early on in conversations with Colleen and I come from a background in kind of program development and evaluation. So I was kind of saying to Colleen, we can evaluate this, and we can actually systematically evaluate this project. And she was just all over that idea right from the beginning. So we formed a separate evaluation team, and we went after some expertise from Memorial and ACOA to form this evaluation team. Colleen and I are the crossover people. We both sit on the evaluation team. This is we decided early on this would be a formative evaluation model. So we're really looking at what worked, what didn't, why and how, not a yes, no type of summative evaluation. We created a program logic model, and from that an evaluation matrix. And one of the first things that we set out to do with the evaluation of this project was the baseline resident survey. So this has been added another dimension to this 2GM trip. And I promise you, I'm not going to speak to this logic model in any great depth, but just to give you a sense of I'm sure many of you have worked with logic models, and they're great because they're like a snapshot, a visual that you can put on one page that summarizes the project, from who's involved in the project, what the activities are, and what those activities are intended to deliver. So what are the outcomes? And of course, we looked at our outcomes as short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So a lot of the language that you saw in those success statements appear in these outcome statements. That look at attitude changes and behavior changes that speak to the capacity building. So this logic model, this is probably iteration about, well, it says version 2.1, so that means it's about the 11th version of the logic model. And of course, that's what you need logic models to do. You need them to kind of evolve with the project. But the nice thing that developing the logic model does is give you the ability to then create a very detailed evaluation matrix. So for every outcome statement, there are a series of evaluation questions. So you see this very first simple outcome statement, Gros Morne Regional Tourism Charters endorsed by Towns Park and activated by a regional organization. There's 7 different evaluation questions. And then what are our measures and indicators and data collection strategies? So this big evaluation matrix is what is guiding that evaluation team. Okay. Now, actually, I didn't talk to you about the resident survey, but I will just say that we did, the evaluation team did launch a resident survey in this past summer when it ended at the end of, so kind of lived through August and September. Very detailed resident survey. We had over 10% participation in each town but one, and some of the towns up to 25 and 30% participation. So fairly successful in that regard because it was a resident survey and quite a long survey with a lot of narrative responses. So we are in the process right now of analyzing that data. It's going slower than we would like, but we are in the process of analyzing that data. And we did design the survey so that it could be applied again. So, you know, it's a survey you could kind of revisit 5 years from now to see what's changed. So I'm going to turn this the microphone back to Colleen, who's going to just give you, I think we're nearly at the end, so there'll be a chance for all of you to ask questions, but just about the current status of the project. Colleen.
Okay, I do want to touch on that resident survey. It's the first survey done, perhaps detailed survey that we did with residents since the 70s. And this survey was also presented before the Ethics Commission to see if it could be published research, and it did get accepted. So just one, that's a very, very important piece. And I think it's a part of where we've started to engage citizens and they can understand where their voice is. So, so the current status is we recently had an election, as you all know, in October. 6 of our 7 towns changed mayors. So, and some of them have never been involved in council before. So you're on a restart, and that's a part of our challenge. So there's new councillors in all towns. On top of that, our working group has 3 out of 7 new town managers. So we, engaging them and bringing them up to speed so they can contribute and see the value for the town is going to be really important. 3 models at the entity. So we're looking at the end of this, what's our process? Are we a legislative body? Are we a partnership body? Are we a volunteer body? So we're looking at all these models right now and finding what's the best one that suits us as a group. And what we are finding is the legislative model is very challenging. And we sort of always been in the space that partnership that delivers will last. So if we prove that is a valuable partnership, we will get the town to stay to the table. So we're seeking alignment now provincially with the Department of Municipal Affairs. Like I said, a year ago, the Premier put a task force in place with municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, to look at recommendations for regional economic development in rural. They are actually looking at different models like we are, the legislative model and how they move forward. So we are on that advisory committee now and feeding back into it and finding the right language to fit nationally into the partnership. We're actually looking at trying to get a federal government department to merge with 7 municipalities. So we have to watch the language and ensure it's documents that they can all sign. Everybody is always worried about how much power they're giving away. And we're saying, this is not about giving away power. This is about empowerment. So I think we've, demonstrated to all the partners that it's not about them losing power. It's about us empowering them. So given the project ownership to partners, we see them as they see it as theirs, even though Gros Morne Cooperating Association is providing the support to get this project off the ground. This is their project. They run it, they decide. The partner sets the outcomes, so it's not a plan being done by Gros Morne Co-op saying, here's your plan, hopefully you will implement it. It's the partner setting the outcomes for this. Finding the best fit for partner representation is going to be fundamental to our success, so we need the people, the decision makers to the table. Understanding and sometimes revising your assumptions, well, that's been continuous through this project. We have adjusted, I guess, our vision and where we're going all through this. And not only have we adjusted ours, but our consultants understood that in order for them to be successful, they have to be a partner, not a consultant. So they have to stay to the table, accept the changes and understand the changes, and help us find a way that's acceptable for all. So that's like, we talked about the importance of that consulting relationship, that we just don't give them a task to do and they walk away and come back and tell us, what we should do. We're going to be a part of that conversation all the way. Provide project management, that would be us, and we will continue to work with this group until they find their own sustainability. No such thing as over-informing, and we've discovered that. Engagement is crucial. And what we did underestimate is the power of the resident engagement and how they can be a leader in the community. Trust is built slowly. If you've seen some of the comments that came back from the communities and the towns in their visioning statements, is about, feeling like partners rather than competitors, not being rivals. So I think they're ready to move forward on a partnership of trust. Behind the scenes, there's always a continued negotiation behind the scenes to, I guess, to get the government to understand where we're at, to get the partners to understand where we're at and where we're going. And, I guess misinformation or lack of understanding of statements has always been really important that we identify. The evaluation results start at the beginning, not at the end. So we've started at the very beginning talking about what this should look like at the end, and we continue to evaluate that as we move forward. So the GM trip, the evolution for us is off that P. So right now it's a project. We want to move it to a plan, and at the end of the day, to a partnership. So I think, the P is very important for us, and the partnership at the end is going to be our success. So this is the celebration of the day that we signed the memorandum of understanding in Cowed, the most northern community of the park. And as you can see, we had a decent turnout, even though we're in the midst of COVID. And very proud of that day. Took a lot to pull that together and get all the partners there and feeling comfortable and safe that they weren't signing away their lives and we weren't disempowering them. So that sort of wraps up the journey for the last year, or actually 2 years for us. I probably confused a lot of you, but we wanted to set it up as a model that could be taken and used in other parts of Newfoundland and Labrador or other parts of Atlantic Canada. And we're willing to share this, and we hope there's some learns that we could pass on to anybody else who'd like to go through this process in the future. So I'm going to leave it open for questions, or Rhoda, you to add, or Jonathan, if you'd like.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Rhoda. An incredible amount of, I think, very important information. When I post this recording, I'll also give you a couple of links, everyone, that you can see where we started from with the STAR plan and where we're going to with the GM trip. And I think one of the things that you'll realize is that a lot of the work is not that sort of sexy, splash in your face. It's the grinded out logic models and the things that really, I think, we don't pay a lot of attention to or even implement, that you find in a lot of strategic planning pieces, because it does take so much work. It does take so much effort. And you'll see those don't manifest themselves in the original STAR plan anywhere, really. It's just a list of things to do more than anything, attached to loosely to a supposed plan piece. So just a question to that, I'm hoping that you might be able to share with folks that are on here, Colleen. We're very lucky that we have a GMCA style organization in our community. And one of the things that we see all around Atlantic Canada coming out of lots of the community development initiatives is this struggle to implement things because there is not that administrative lead or the resources that can hire somebody to do that. What is, from your perspective, if you were suggesting something out to individuals here who may not have sort of that administrative support, is there a path forward? Is there a way forward if you don't have a GMCA?
I do think there's a way forward if you don't have a GMCA. And one of the things I've been pushing with the province and all the partners, you do have partners out there that probably holds a lot of trust and has been in your region for a lot of time. So for me, let's stop creating new stuff. Let's make the old stuff or some of the organizations that's been there a long time, has built a lot of trust in their and capacity in their region. They may not be the obvious, but they could be a partner just based on they hold all the relationships that you need. And for me, it's I built the relationship or the co-op with municipalities, like I said, in parks, but and business and the culture community. So you can see all these entities that we've sort of formed in the region in partnership. So, this is a little bit more formal. We're all going to be looking at the one plan, but we have had a relationship, a long-standing relationship of over 20 years with the business community, with parks, with the community. So that trust is there. They might not always like what we do and we may have to adjust, but I think that trust component is always undervalued and it's really, really important as you move forward.
Thanks. Questions from the audience? Anybody have anything? If you want, just unmute and fire away.
So I just want to touch base on something that I sort of left out. I refer to the province doing their regional economic development task force for rural Newfoundland. I just want to talk about the steps that they talked about because I was talking to Rhoda. I'm not giving away anything, that's confidential, but just the steps they're laying out in their heads and where we're at. So they said, develop a regional vision, which was STAR for us. Develop a regional economic development plan. This is Gros Morne GM trip for sure. Identify and build capacity for working together effectively as a region. So that would be us also, GM trip. And they're looking at then pursuing implementation of these strategies, which is also a part of GM trip, and monitoring evaluation. So another part of this they're looking at is what's the governance model they're going to use in these regions? Is it going to be a legislative government body where, we have a legislative region for waste management? Is there going to be a legislative region for healthcare? Is there going to be a legislative region for other components of these municipalities? So we're trying to say, you don't need to use that big stick. You don't need to legislate anything. You need to show that what you're saying can actually hit the mark and produce results. And if you can, you will have the partners to the table very freely and willingly. So that's a part of our approach rather than the legislative approach. But we are lining up on where the task force is looking at and how they develop this regional strategy.
Other questions? One of the thing. Oh, Amy, go ahead.
Sure.
Oh, we're having a hard time hearing you, Amy.
You are? How about now?
A little bit better.
Okay, sorry. So can you talk, Rhoda or Colleen, about what some results might be in the future? Like what kind of results do you envision as a result of all of this good work?
Okay, so the
So you're still
project is-
breaking up a little bit, but I think the question was, what are the results into the future you're looking for? Okay.
Yes. So this project has got 14 tangible projects that will be identified and developed with 7 priorities, 1 for each community. So they will get a tangible tourism asset that they want to develop that will be endorsed by the region. But and the other thing was to build capacity within the region. So I talked about the, 6 new mayors.
Mhm.
So at the beginning of this, it wasn't for me about these 7 tangible projects that these towns were going to get. The real challenge for us was in Gros Morne, we were at a critical point of growth without a plan. And I felt that we were in danger of losing our communities by this ad hoc development that, okay, now we're moved to a 6-month seasonal industry. And therefore we make sense for a lot of these companies to come in and move into Gros Morne without really saying what we really wanted these towns to look like. So I think it was important for us to have a plan that we were comfortable with as a community as we move forward and grow this industry, that we recognize and we're living in communities that we still love and enjoy. And like I said, we're less than 3,000 people. So we need the residents to love how we develop, move forward, because we need their support in growing this industry. We can't do it on our own. Parks can't, develop without growing these communities to take care of their guests. And so that piece was very important. Also, what we've seen was a big changeover in municipal leadership, and we needed a plan that was a little bit tighter. So I guess we could control probably the mistakes that could be made at a very large level with regards to impacting the regional reason why people come to Gros Morne. So having a town make a decision that's going to impact all of us is going to be detrimental to us. So we wanted to do something to stabilize some of that leadership. These town clerks are overworked and do not have the capacity to do economic development. So we wanted to put an ABC plan for some things in place to update the legislation that help them protect their towns and their communities. So for me, it was more about building the capacity within the leadership of the community rather than the tangible projects.
And I should add, actually, just when Colleen talked about the town clerk managers, a little offshoot that has happened at GM Trip is that we are going to be producing something, whether it's a little paper or I'm not sure what it's going to be, that actually details the insurmountable challenges that these town clerk managers have. So what is it, what makes their role impossible? And believe me, when you look at all they're supposed to do, their role is impossible. And what could improve it? What could make it better? So we are actually, it wasn't part of the original plan on GM Trip, but because of the work we're doing with partners, we've had one session with them where they began to define kind of what made their role impossible. And we are going to finish that up. We kind of put it to one side because we have so much on our plate coming toward the end of this year, but we're going to pick it up in the new year. And then we're going to go through a process of actually looking at what would improve that. So we don't know what impact that's going to have or exactly how we're going to share that, but it is something that the town clerks managers are very grateful about, that somebody is actually recognizing that they have an impossible role.
Thank you for that. I think,
Quick question.
sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just sort of wondering, with regional engagement and regional municipalities, are you guys looking at like another layer of governance, or, as you're sort of saying, the town clerks are already overworked. So in terms of them working together, I don't know, Colleen, I know you mentioned a few things as we're going through there in terms of potential models. I don't know, just what are you guys thinking about that regionalization piece and how does that look potentially?
So the regionalization piece is basically this, it's on tourism. So we are doing a regional plan for tourism, and won't take care of everything for the plan for all the communities, but it will address the tourism industry. And we're seeing this, that actually it's not another level of governance or I guess authority. It's a table where we can take some of the stuff off the community's plate and perhaps say trails for one. So maybe we see the big regional initiative is on trails. So we would say, okay, we will work with all your communities. Here's the, we will work on sustainable trail system for Gros Morne. And give us the 2 priorities or 3 priorities that you'd like to work on as a region. Is it winter? So it's not about taking anything away. It's about, yeah, this is what we're trying to do. Could you help us do that? And we'll do it at this table rather than on our own at 7 different tables.
Thank you for that, Colleen. I think one of the things you hit on is very important to think about of, if we don't have those planning component pieces in behind, and all we ever talk about is growth in tourism. And many of us in Atlantic Canada, we all know, it doesn't matter if you're in Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland and Labrador, we all had the same plan. Those 2020 visions, we're going to double revenue, double visitation. And, there were these lofty goals, but what was the impact? And Colleen and I had a group that we had taken a number of years ago, and we saw the impacts of what that could be in a small community along the Bay of Fundy in New Brunswick. When we were meeting with a mayor in her office, because she couldn't leave her office because she had to push a button on a computer screen to ensure that a well pump wouldn't speed up so they would get boil orders. The thing that we learned was, without proper planning, the infrastructure that goes to try to support things like visitation to communities that have infrastructure that's not built for 300,000 or 400,000 people coming through, is, if you don't have that, then the whole thing collapses on itself. And I think what we're trying to do here is maybe re-examine that word growth and what sustains your community, what leads to a healthy community at the end of the day. And I think those are the conversations that you need to have. And as we close off here, it's one of the, I'm going to say it's one of the defining moments for what we're trying to do at GMIST right now. We don't have the answer. We're having conversations with people like Colleen and Rhoda. We're having conversations with, other incredible leaders like Micah Fardy in the Upper Bay of Fundy with what they're doing in New Brunswick. To me, there's different approaches and different possibilities of how we approach this topic, and I think it's really, really important. Tourism isn't a solution to everything, for sure. But I think it's part of the conversation that we can have within our communities. And unfortunately, what transpires, and especially in a lot of rural communities that have lost access to their resource extraction industries that had sustained them for many years, is that this conversation of, hey, let's go to tourism, it'll be the savior for everything that we do, is a conversation I think that we need to have a little bit more in-depth conversation around, and where we want to go with that. So it's something that we will be exploring in greater depth coming the new year, that you'll hear some more on coming out of GMIST. So stay tuned on that, because I'm hoping that there is a wider Pan-Atlantic piece there that we'll be able to engage people on around training, development, and support for communities around the region. And we're at our time limit. Colleen, Rhoda, amazing. Thank you for all of that. I will have this posted up a little bit later today. I'll see if I can put a few of the links on the website as well, so you can go and have a look if you want to, of where we started and where we're going with the GM trip piece. It's almost to that end of December kind of cutoff time. So I'm going to say happy holidays. This is the last session for the fall. It's been very incredible. A lot of you have been on these multiple sessions, which is really nice to see. Stay tuned. There'll be hopefully in early January a new list of these sandbox sessions and new training pieces coming up for registration. Any last words, Colleen and Rhoda, before we let folks go?
No, just I want to say hi to Randy. I haven't seen him in a long time, and it's nice to see his face again. It's been a while.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.